You're not going to believe the chaos that unfolded when an Ho tried to drag me into their drama, even though I didn't even live inside their neighborhood. It all started when this one woman, let's just call her Ho Karen, decided she had the power to control not just her own community, but even properties outside of it. She thought she could sue me, yes, actually sue me, for not following rules that didn't even apply to my home. Imagine getting served with paperwork claiming you broke Ho rules when you're not even part of their Ho. At first, I thought it was a mix-up, but it quickly became clear this was something much bigger. Karen wasn't acting alone either. Behind her was the entire Ho board, nodding along, convinced they had authority over me and anyone else living near their subdivision. The arrogance was unreal. They came at me hard, thinking they could intimidate me into paying fees, following restrictions, and even tearing down part of my property. The worst part? They were so sure they'd win. They underestimated just how badly things could backfire when you push the wrong person too far. I knew I had to fight back, not just for myself, but to stop them from pulling the same stunt on other homeowners. What started as a ridiculous lawsuit turned into a full-blown battle that exposed just how shady their board had become. In only 2 days, everything shifted, and the same people who tried to crush me found themselves drowning in their own mess. But how did I turn their lawsuit into the very thing that destroyed their entire Ho board? Stick around, because what happened next shocked everyone, including Karen herself. The more I dug into the situation, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about me. Ho Karen and her board had a long history of bullying anyone they thought they could control. Neighbors whispered stories of fines for things as small as the color of someone's mailbox, threats for having too many cars in a driveway, even letters demanding people cut down trees on their own property. It was like they thrived on fear and intimidation, and most people didn't have the time, money, or energy to fight back. That was exactly how the board kept their power. But my case was different. I didn't live inside their community, and their rules legally had no reach over me. Still, they tried to twist the paperwork to make it seem like I did. When I looked closer, I realized their lawsuit was full of contradictions, missing signatures, and sloppy mistakes. That's when I started to suspect something even bigger. Maybe this wasn't just arrogance. Maybe the entire board was running things in a way that wasn't just unfair, but actually unlawful. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something, and the more I learned, the more I realized they had overplayed their hand. Karen, especially, seemed obsessed with proving she could bend me to her will. She'd show up near my property, making little comments about how it would be easier if I just complied, and reminding me how many people before me had given in. It was almost like she wanted me to be scared, to make an example out of me. Instead, her determination only fueled mine. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. What I uncovered next didn't just shake their confidence, it threatened to tear apart the entire foundation of their. The deeper I looked into the lawsuit, the more bizarre it became. The board had filed claims suggesting that my property somehow benefited from their community, which they said gave them the right to enforce their rules. The logic made no sense. My house wasn't connected to their utilities, I wasn't using their amenities, and I had never agreed to any Ho contract. Still, they were acting as if I had signed away my rights the moment I bought my home. That stretch of reasoning alone was almost laughable, but when I traced the paperwork, it pointed to something even more troubling. I started hearing from neighbors who had quietly fought back against the Ho in the past. One family told me about how they were slapped with thousands in bogus fees, only to discover later that the money didn't match up with official Ho records. Another neighbor mentioned how Karen herself seemed to run the show behind closed doors, often overriding other board members and pushing through decisions without proper votes. It became obvious that this wasn't a group of people protecting their neighborhood. It was a small circle clinging to power, with Karen at the center of it all. At the same time, I noticed the pressure they were putting on me wasn't just through legal papers. Strange cars would park across from my driveway late at night. Anonymous letters showed up in my mailbox with vague reminders about compliance. Friends warned me that Karen was telling people in town I was a troublemaker who refused to follow community standards. It felt like they were trying to isolate me before the case even went to court. Every move they made only convinced me more that they were hiding something. And the closer I got to the truth, the more desperate the whole board became. Something was about to break, but not in the way they expected. By this point, the lawsuit had become more than just an inconvenience. It was the center of a storm that seemed ready to explode. Karen and the HOA board filed motion after motion, burying me in paperwork, convinced I would fold under the pressure. But each document they sent me only gave me more clues about the way they were running things. Financial records didn't match, signatures didn't line up, and their so-called evidence often contradicted itself. It was like pulling on a loose thread, and every time I tugged, more of their web began to unravel. The tension around town was just as intense. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up were suddenly reaching out to me in secret, sharing stories and old letters they had saved. One elderly couple gave me a binder filled with notices they had received over the years, each one more outrageous than the last. Another neighbor slipped me meeting notes that revealed how the board made decisions without ever putting them to a community vote. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't a board protecting homeowners. This was a group protecting their own control, and Karen was leading the charge. Still, the more evidence I gathered, the more aggressive they became. Karen showed up at a local store one afternoon and loudly accused me of destroying the neighborhood. People stopped and stared, and I realized this wasn't just about legal power anymore. It was about pride, reputation, and control. The board wasn't just fighting to win a lawsuit. They were fighting to keep their grip on everyone around them. As the court date approached, the pressure hit its peak. The documents were stacked, the witnesses lined up, and both sides were ready. I knew what I was about to reveal could change everything, and once it came out, there would be no going back. Just when I thought I had a solid case prepared, something unexpected happened that shifted everything. A neighbor quietly approached me with a folder they said I needed to see. Inside were copies of financial statements from the HOA, but these weren't the same documents the board had provided in their filings. The numbers were different, drastically different. According to these records, large sums of money were missing from the HOA's account, and the dates lined up with the same period when Karen was pushing the hardest against me. It wasn't just sloppy management anymore. It looked like funds had been diverted somewhere they didn't belong. This discovery added a whole new layer to the conflict. If what I was holding was real, the lawsuit against me wasn't just a power move. It could have been a smokescreen to distract homeowners from noticing the money trail. That possibility alone made the stakes much higher. It also explained why the board seemed so desperate to shut me down at any cost. They weren't just protecting their authority, they might have been protecting themselves from exposure. The tension grew thicker in the community. Homeowners who had been silent for years started murmuring about missing dues and questioning where their money had gone. At the same time, Karen doubled down. She sent out a long letter to the neighborhood painting me as the enemy, warning people not to fall for my lies. Instead of weakening me, though, her tactics only fueled curiosity. People wanted to know why their HOA was fighting so hard to silence one homeowner who technically wasn't even under their control. With the court date only days away, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. The truth I was about to uncover had the power to shake the entire HOA board to its core, and Karen knew it. When the court date finally arrived, the room was packed. Homeowners, neighbors, and even people from outside the community had shown up, eager to see what would happen. Karen and the HOA board sat confidently at their table, stacks of binders and papers in front of them, clearly expecting to bury me under legal jargon. But when it was my turn to speak, I pulled out the documents I had collected, the conflicting financial records, the unsigned notices, the testimonies from neighbors who had been silenced for years. As I laid everything out, the mood in the courtroom shifted. What began as a simple case about whether the HOA had authority over me quickly turned into something much bigger. The judge leaned in, asking pointed questions about the missing money and the irregular filings. Karen's confident expression started to crack as the inconsistencies piled up. For the first time, the board looked rattled. The final blow came when I revealed the second set of financial statements, the one showing large sums of money unaccounted for. The judge immediately ordered an investigation into the HOA's finances. Karen tried to object, her voice shaking, but the damage was already done. The lawsuit against me collapsed right there, dismissed in front of everyone. But the real twist came moments later. A board member, clearly fed up, stood up and admitted in open court that they had questioned the finances for months but were pressured into silence. That confession set off a chain reaction. Other members began distancing themselves from Karen, pointing fingers and shifting blame. In just a matter of minutes, the board that once seemed untouchable was crumbling from the inside. I walked out knowing the fight was over for me, but for Karen and her board, the real battle was only beginning. In the weeks after the court hearing, the fallout spread quickly. The lawsuit against me was not only dismissed, but the judge's order for a financial investigation sent shockwaves through the entire community. Homeowners who had once been too scared to speak out suddenly found their voices. Meetings that used to be quiet and controlled turned into packed gatherings where people demanded answers. For the first time, the board couldn't hide behind legal threats or intimidating letters. Their power was gone, and their secrets were unraveling. Karen, who once strutted around as if she owned every driveway and mailbox in sight, lost her grip almost overnight. With the board members turning on her and neighbors calling for accountability, she had no choice but to step down. The investigation revealed years of sloppy handling of HOA dues, and while not every detail was criminal, the mismanagement was enough to bankrupt their entire board. The money they had wasted trying to crush me ended up being the very thing that exposed them. For the homeowners, it was more than just a victory. It was freedom. Families who had lived under constant pressure finally felt relief. The couple who had been fined over their mailbox, they were reimbursed. The family who had been threatened about their cars, no one bothered them again. It was like the weight of years of control had lifted, and people could finally enjoy their homes without fear. Looking back, I realized the fight was never just about me living outside their HOA. It was about standing up to abuse of power and not letting intimidation win. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't the strongest, and sometimes the people who think they hold all the control are the ones who fall the hardest. And in this case, they did.